So methods are another very important struct-related Go concept. Now, in addition to methods, there also is another special function you can create when working with structs, though that function is really just a pattern that's often used when writing Go code instead of a feature baked into the language as methods are. And the special kind of function I'm talking about is a so-called creation or constructor function, which is simply a utility function that takes care of creating a struct, so that you don't have to create it like this in your code, which you absolutely can do, but that you can instead create it with help of a utility function, such a creation or constructor function. Now, those constructor functions typically start with the word new, but again, that's just a pattern, just a convention, not something you have to do. But here I'll stick to that convention. And then they contain the name of the struct that will be created. In this case, user. Then you add a parameter list and curly braces, and you have a normal function. Because, as mentioned, this is now not some feature built into Go, but really just a pattern, a convention which you'll often see. Now, the job of this function now is to create such a struct. Therefore, we can copy this code, paste it in there, and return that created struct. Now, of course, Go is complaining here because I did not specify a return type, so we should do that and make it clear that this function will return a value of type user, so a user struct value. And of course, this function also doesn't have this data that's required: first name, last name, birth date, and so on. So we should accept this here: first name of type string, last name of type string, and birth date of type string. And of course, since they're all of the same type, we can just put the type at the end. And here I'll therefore rename this to first name, last name, and birth date with a lowercase d. And with that, we have a utility function that creates a struct. We can now go down to our code here, and instead of creating the struct like this, we can call new user, and then pass user first name, user last name, and user birth date as values to this function. And we can now call this function as often as we want anywhere in our program to quickly create a new user. So instead of repeating this code all the time, we can now just call this function. And that's not the only advantage, as you'll soon see. But with that, if we save this and we give this a try and run this code, we can enter these details here. And you see that it works as before. Now, one thing you can do in this creation function here, in this constructor function, is return a pointer to the user struct instead of that user struct itself. You then just also have to edit the return type here and make it clear that a pointer will be returned by adding this asterisk here. Now, by returning a pointer here instead of a value, we again prevent this value from being copied, because if you would return a regular value, a copy would be created. That's not just the case for received arguments, but also for returned values. And therefore, by returning a pointer, we avoid this. Nonetheless, as always, this doesn't really make sense and isn't really important for simple values like this. Nonetheless, you should know about this feature, that you can also return a pointer here. Now, when returning a pointer, you also have to edit this code down here though, because now app user will not store a user object, instead a pointer to a user object. Because that is what new user returns, right? That's important to keep in mind. With that though, you can save this and run this code as before, enter all your details, and get the same result as before. But now with that constructor function that now also uses a pointer as a return value.